All right, well, thank you everyone for attending our presentation today. So we do have a change in presenters today. We have Jacob Adler. Ignacio Sanchez, unfortunately, will not be available today to present, but Jacob will be filling in and he will be introducing himself just in a few minutes. I am Jocelyn Castillo and I am the Information Literacy Librarian. And Jacob, you could go ahead.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Hello, everyone. I'm Jacob Adler. I've recently come on as the new cataloging librarian. It's very nice to be meeting everyone, and thank you for coming to our session.
Great. Thank you, Jacob, for that. Okay, so let's get started here. Okay, so this is pretty much what we aim to do today. So we are looking at evaluating sources, specifically sources from social media information. We will also look at, Jacob would cover the evaluating AI sources. So that's going to be interesting as well. We also have some library research guides that we have existing on the library homepage, which do provide how to evaluate sources. And we are updating those, reference those research guides as well. So that's always good to check up on them and see what we have new there. We're also going to sort of briefly discuss some challenges and opportunities that we do have in evaluating sources in these different platforms. And furthermore, Jacob will discuss and give us a presentation on or a minor example on AI data gathering and AI ingesting other AI data as well. So these are going to be essential tools for resources for students at all levels. They can be useful, and hopefully you will be using some of these and introducing them into your classes if you haven't done so already, or maybe just incorporating some aspect of them as they evaluate social media and AI sources. Okay, so here what we do have, so normally when we evaluate sources just in general, what we're looking for is, for example, credibility. So who is this author? You know, are they experts? And so we look for that. We also look for currency. So when was it written, excuse me. Is it something that was more recent, something that's a little bit maybe outdated? So we are looking for currency. We're also looking for relevancy. So how appropriate is it? Is it an academic source? Is it maybe a popular read? So, and also objectivity. So, what is the point to the particular material that we're looking at? Is it maybe something as entertainment? That's for entertainment. Is it something for advertising? Is it maybe portraying the author's bias? So we usually look for that. So one particular checklist too that we do have, and it's commonly used by students and commonly introduced to them as well, is CRAP. So it's currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So this one, of course, CRAP is a little bit more organized, and it is a list-oriented checklist tool. Now, these are some of the sections in a little bit more detail that do make up CRAP. So while it is concise, it can be applied when evaluating social media information. However, there are some limitations that do exist when using this particular checklist tool. And some of them that are worth noting are, for example, the potential of yes, no responses to questions in the different areas that we have here. So for example, under currency, is the information current or out of date for your topic? That can potentially be a yes, no answer. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's evaluating and using that question can say, well, this was published X year, or it's how recent it is. Has the information been revised or updated? Again, that provides for a yes, no answer. Moving down to authority. So the source of the information, what are the author's qualifications to write on the topic? So of course here that this is when you can write a little bit more, and the limitation of yes, no answering this question is not there. But as you can see, it is in some of the other questions. It can also generate a narrow focus when assessing social media information. So going back to the authority question, what are the author's qualifications to write on a topic? One of the answers maybe could be like the author is just, maybe affiliated with our organization that allows them to write about the topic, but it doesn't really go any more into further details of like how the author perhaps has other credentials like education or anything like that. So again, there's limitations to this when it comes to social media, evaluating social media information. Now, going back to social media information in academic settings, students are consulting social media information, and they will most likely continue to do so, especially for information, for example, in the upcoming election. They may use it to either explore opinions shared about the candidates, maybe join discussions about things that are of particular interest to them, like the economy, which is really being discussed, or also just to participate in events with shared interest in social media. So the need for specific measures to evaluate social media information is really needed, and it does call for information literacy and critical thinking strategies that sometimes CRAP does not call for. So then we do ask ourselves, before I go into some of those evaluation strategies. So social media information, right? I'm saying that. So what do we mean by social media information? And how are students evaluating social media information? And then the specific approaches of social media information. So when I do refer to social media information, I am referring to these different platforms that provide social media information. It is also known as digital news, so information that is provided digitally. For example, we are familiar with Facebook, which is considered a social networking site. We are also familiar with Reddit, which is a social question and answer site where anyone can go and post a question and anyone can chime in and answer such questions. We also have microblogs, such as X, which is formerly known as Instagram. So there's different things there. So of course, all of these offer different types of information, from news, focusing on news, politics. They can explore individual interests, ideas, opinions from others on certain topics, or even health information. And sometimes students do use any of these platforms, and there are so many more, to find background information on a topic for a paper that they're working on, or for specific research for a class. Information in these sites is also available in different modalities. So whether it's tutorials, whether it's videos, whether it's audio, whether it's whether they're images, or blogs, which tend to be a little lengthier, or microblogs, which of course we know are smaller when it comes to presentation. So then we do ask ourselves, so since students are using social media information for academia, we are asking ourselves, well, how exactly are they evaluating the information? Right? So how are students identifying misinformation or fake news? What are the evaluation methods students are most likely to use? So here, what I have, I've consulted some studies here. So the first here, it was a longitudinal study, which examined undergraduate students' social media use of information and evaluation. And what the researchers found is that students lean towards superficial physical cues, such as the length of the entry, the image quality, if there's any advertisements around it. So they focused highly on that. The second study I consulted here investigated the evaluation of social media information using specifically Instagram, WhatsApp, and Telegram. And now these students, however, were graduated, so they completed their degrees. And they specifically focus on these three areas, these three different platforms. And what they found is that students were interested in evaluating information that either shared links, some audios, some images, and a specific aesthetic design. So that's kind of interesting, sort of physical cues there as well. The last study I consulted examined how students engage with and evaluated digital news. What they found is that students grounded their evaluation strategies on their previous experiences, on their biased judgments, and also just using the specific references that they consulted in that particular source. So that was quite interesting. They found that students concentrating mainly on what was in front of them. So they read vertically, meaning they did not consult any external sources to either confirm or uncover any misinformation, which we know as lateral reading. So I found that interesting. So now focusing specifically on evaluating social media. So some of the specific approaches that I did found are these two here that are listed: Cacao information literacy approach, and the journalistic, which we're probably familiar with, the journalistic or investigative approach. So for the Cacao, there are different areas where you would also look at here, different sections to it. So this is what Cacao stands for: credentials, claims, objectives, and worldview. So as you can see here, well, first for the study where this was created, a convenient sampling of undergraduate students was used to examine the use of this particular method to evaluate social media information. Now for credentials, in addition to just background screening of the creators of the content or the author, it does ask for, are they experts in the field? Where do they work, perhaps, maybe looking at that, if that's available. Do they belong to a nonprofit organization, or perhaps it's just an advocacy group? Or are they fictitious experts on the topic that they are discussing? So are they self-claimed as experts? So that's something that does require a little bit more digging of students to do when they're evaluating for the credentials. For claims, so in addition to just, are they truthful and accurate, what we're looking at is to identify other experts in the field and consult what their thoughts are on the topic or the area of interest. For objectives, additionally, what we're looking at are perhaps are they sharing their opinion? You know, it's an opinion that's being shared, or maybe is the entry for entertainment, or is the entry for deception? So here, definitely critical thinking skills are essential for students to have if they're looking at the objective here. Now, worldview, very interesting. So it is the personal experience and worldview's influence of the authors or the content creators. So looking for that and seeing how also that ties into what they have presented as far as their entry. And also looking for those that agree with the content as well. So looking not just at the author views, but looking at others that also agree with that particular entry. So now the journalistic or investigative approach, what we're looking at is, of course, the what, who, when, where, and why. What's interesting about this is that the Association of College and Research Libraries framework from information literacy and higher education guided this model. So it's really interesting. So the order is not necessarily important of how the questions are answered, but it is recommended that students begin their evaluation process with the what and they end with the why. So the what here, of course, type of source. So what are we looking at? You know, is it a podcast? Is it an encyclopedia entry or a site created for an assignment? Sometimes students are assigned the creation of a website or a PDF that is then shared online, which is very helpful, but sometimes it can be outdated and sometimes it's actually really good. So what type of source is this, in addition to, you know, if it's an article, of course. It does, for the what which you're looking for, it provides an understanding that there are different types of sources as well. That's really what we're looking at there. It helps in identifying the audience for the source as well, and who should be reading this. So should students be reading it? Maybe it's someone else who's a different expert, or, you know, maybe you're looking for more information. So the what really kind of sets off students in a sense of understanding the type of information from that perspective. Now, the who, of course, we're looking into the author or the content creator and their particular expertise level in the area. So the who, it is very similar to authority in CRAP, but it is in addition to the credentials and experience, it kind of dives in a little deeper into the author or the content creator, such as affiliations and organizations, maybe the organization itself, what kind of organization is it, the educational level of the content creator or the author, and other things as well. And that is to determine whether the author is a self-proclaimed expert or actually someone who is an expert in that particular field. The when, In addition to looking for a publication date, students are also asked to look for maybe the latest reader comments. So who has commented, when was it commented? So it's looking more at that and helping to identify a community of readers with similar interests as well. The where, not just the publication, right, but the publication process as well. The interest from others that are not the author, but play an important role in the publication process. So maybe the makeup of the board members, if it is peer reviewed, something that's peer reviewed, or something that actually does go through the board member process that's not peer reviewed. It also examines if there are multiple interests from people who are involved in the publication process. So this again is for content creators, a content that has been created in social media, as well as the author of anything, let's say of a blog. And then of course the why, we consider examining more material things or a deeper intention of why this information, the value of this information. A good example is something like a book review that also promotes the sale of the book. So it's not only providing a book review, but it's also saying, hey, purchase the material. So there's like that underlying intention of that. So hopefully these are things, of course, oops, I'm sorry. These are things that can be used, these approaches as a tool. So challenges, absolutely, there are definitely challenges. So some approaches will be more appropriate for certain social media information compared to others. These approaches can also be time consuming. So you may think, yes, I'm going to share that with my students, but it can take up a lot of time. So we do understand that that's also a challenge. And also engaging students who are actually using any of these evaluating tools, right? That can also be a challenge. Nonetheless, these approaches, which can be combined or perhaps some used in certain social media platforms when compared to others, it does allow us to start the conversation, to start understanding the students are using social media information, and that it is important to find ways to help them understand how to evaluate the information that they find in social media. Now here, oops, I'm so sorry, I was fast there. So here we do have in the library, on the library homepage, we do have research guides that we have available that students can have access to at all times, as long as they have access to the internet. So here we have citation sources. We also have specifically evaluating sources. We have research guides for fact checking, which help them look for fact checking, verifying fake news. We also have a research guide on how to use the library. So that is very helpful as well, because again, some of these evaluation tools can be used in social media information. We also have tutorials. So these tutorials are on a library homepage as well, and students have access to it, and understanding where these where this information comes from, articles, databases, what exactly does Boolean searching mean? That is also helpful when it comes to looking for information in social media and also evaluating information in social media. So right now I am going to stop sharing my screen, and Jacob is going to jump on now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I hope everybody can see. Is it coming through okay on my end? Thank you. So yeah, to kind of dovetail onto what she was talking about, a lot of the sort of strategies and ideas that are being used to evaluate social media information sources also apply to things like AI generated content. One of those tutorials that is linked there has this list, the top 10 reasons for evaluating internet sources. And even though this is, generally applied to kind of web-based information sources, a lot of these ideas can be equally applied to AI generated content. This includes ideas like cognizance of a lack of review of material, because if something is being AI generated, then it's not subject to a process of screening or evaluation or criticism. It's just sort of created as is, and therefore needs to be therefore critically evaluated by the end reader rather than passing through an intermediary process. And of course, as we're probably all aware, AI content is no more immunized from bias than any other form of content. And in fact, perhaps more so since there is not quite as much transparency necessarily in that bias. So understanding when that's present or absent is also an important factor in determining the relevance of AI information. Corroborating sources. It's a lot of basic critical thinking skills apply to AI as much, if not more so, than they do from sources, from other, scholarly or otherwise sources. And the thing that probably a lot of us have become aware of, although maybe not in so many words, is that AI generated information is not necessarily better, quote unquote, than other forms of information. It's not necessarily worse, but that doesn't necessarily make it better either. One of the links on those tutorials goes to this this SUNY Albany page that invites its users to determine the expertise of the author. Well, because it's and it says here, the identity of an author is not necessarily known immediately to a reader. Well, what is the identity of the author when the author, quote unquote, is an AI? And that's not necessarily a simple question to answer because, can AI generated content be considered to have an author or to have sort of a standard of authorship? And what does that mean? And then there's the question of expertise. How do you evaluate that if it's coming from an AI system? Certainly, perhaps the data that AI was trained on or was input into the system has an impact, perhaps, on the viability of that data. But if you're getting that from a one-to-one interface from your end, then how do you evaluate that expertise? Does the maker of that AI have any impact on what that data is going to embody or take the form of? Again, it's not a different set of skills than the ones that Jocelyn were outlining in terms of all of social media created data. It's just that it needs to be applied in a slightly different context. And again, the other X factor in this is you, the end user. If you input different questions or prompts into an AI, does that then change the nature of the end result? And even as I found very early on when ChatGPT was first making the waves, even the same question or the same prompt does not necessarily have a consistency of answers to it. There's a lot of factors like this to consider. And as kind of an example of what I'm talking about in a slightly tangential context, I very recently was playing a chess game against ChatGPT. Now, I'm not some expert chess player necessarily, but I do know the rules of the game. And over here, I have a diagram illustrating what the gameplay looks like after 3 moves. Now, why do I bring this up? Because it's an example of how AI systems can recognize patterns. They do have, in general, an aptitude for understanding sets of precepts and then creating results based on those precepts. And again, the nature of the information that's input into it, either from its training or from you, the end user, is going to make it react accordingly. And in conjunction with that, it can grasp tasks of varying complexity. In chess, you have abstract thought, there's strategy, there's, move and response. It can respond to changes in a particular scenario. And so this is sort of a compact and simplified version of that, but you can extrapolate that out into more complex schools of thought. I remember there was a very long conversation I had with ChatGPT when I was trying to understand what an NFT is. And I'm not sure if I do, but I think maybe the system has a better idea of it than I do. And similarly to that, an AI system has precepts of already existing ideas, which can then be iterated upon. I don't have to explain to ChatGPT what chess is. it already knows what it is, or at least knows what I'm talking about when I say, "Hey, would you like to play chess against me?" So there's already certain preloads of information within it, and you can see this in a lot of fields. I have heard, for example, numerous reports from people involved in computer science and coding and things like that, that AI systems can be very helpful if you already know what you're doing at expediting work. Now, the flip side of this chess example, however, is that what if you try to cheat? Now, over here, I have conducted a totally illegal move. I've tried to move the bishop to c4. The bishop can't move through that pawn over there, as I've crudely illustrated with my diagram. Now, how did ChatGPT react to this? Well, I said, "Oh, I'm going to move my bishop over there." ChatGPT is just continuing as if I didn't make an illegal move. So what gives with that? Well, AI systems have a limited ability to address unorthodox sets of information. um, there are certain ideas that it is trying to embody a given AI system when you are interacting with it that can lead to these, results that are not in step with the reality that you're trying to extract from it. And it's continuing as if it is correct. It has sort of an assumption about itself that it is always correct, whereas you may not have that assumption about it. In short, an AI does not always grasp the rules of the game, either literally, in this case, since it does not quite gel with the rules of chess, or metaphorically. In scholarly research, you might ask an AI system for a list of sources, but those sources may not be appropriate to what you're researching, or indeed, as an early example that I found, may not exist at all. Because as we know, AI hallucinates and they make up things, and they're not always adaptable to new circumstances. I mean, you can try and correct it yourself, but that also assumes that you have prior knowledge that you are bringing to it. The way that I always phrase it is that the system does not display inherently correct information. It displays information that looks correct. And there's a big difference between knowing how to play chess and looking like you know how to play chess. And I'm sure that quite a number of you saw this article that was in the New York Times yesterday about, sort of the logical end result of all these sort of what happens when AI becomes so massive and all encompassing that it kind of folds in on itself. There was an article about AI, potentially, and this is phrased as kind of a danger, being trained on information that was itself generated by AI. And over here in this diagram on the right here, you can see how handwritten digits over multiple different iterations of being fed into AI become ultimately illegible and useless. So that's sort of the danger of that kind of thing. And I think the more awareness that we as educators have of these dangers and also of the advantages of it, the more we'll be able to balance kind of the ideas and the risks of that sort of thing. The way I always phrase it is that you have to treat information derived from an AI as if you're getting it from some guy. And it's some guy that has access to millions of different data points, and maybe more so than the average some guy, but it is still some guy that you don't know. And that's why critical thinking is more important nowadays, probably, than it used to be, or at least more important in this context. Um, and so I think I can turn it back over to Jocelyn to sort of try and bring this home. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, okay, let me just. Share. Let me just here, share. All right, and that was, we were here. Sorry, just catching up here. Okay, yeah, so this is a list of references from the studies that I did consult for social media information, evaluation of social media information. So they're going to be listed there from you. So now we do open it up to you all. Are there any questions for us? And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen in case you would like to share your questions in the chat. Or if you have any ways that you're using in your classrooms, any sort of tools or any suggestions in evaluating social media that you can use with us as well. We're looking for that too. So any comments? And let's see here.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you hear me?
Yes, Rocio?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this presentation. I have a, what do you suggest to do when, for example, last semester, I asked my student how they get the information, how they get update with what is happening now. And many of my students, they said like, well, I just listen to my mom. She's what she sees on TV, or many other students say like, I just getting the information from this Citizen app, and what is happening, no? And I was like, I didn't know what Citizen app was at that moment, and I said okay, but then I just search for that, and well, that's not a source of information, no? And it seems like at least for that particular group, and my students, they don't look for sources for get information. What do you suggest to do in these cases? Apparently they say like, no, the reality is too much for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rocio, for your question. Sure. Jacob, you could chime in, if you have anything you want to add. But what I would say to that, that's why we felt it was really important, especially now before the semester starts, to kind of show some of the tools that are out there that can be used. And that's what it is. We do get a lot of students. I met a few students last semester in the spring that did say that the only place they went for information was social media. They didn't use the databases. So that kind of got me into thinking. So to answer your question, what I would do is try to incorporate some type of an evaluation process in the class. And again, like I said, you can either use the list, and this will be shared with everyone. You can either use the list that's in the Cacao evaluation, or maybe the journalistic approach, the investigative one, or even from CRAC. Maybe you can pull a couple of things from there and just say to the students, okay, fine, you're using that, but who is it that's writing? Is it someone who's an expert in the field? Let's talk about maybe others that are chiming in as well. Citizens app, I'm aware of that. And it is a lot of different information coming in from just your common citizen, right? They're kind of giving information on what's happening on their block, on the street, whenever they see it. So these are from people that are seeing it happen, but how can we use that information? That if you're using that information to write something in your class, in your classes, or something for your assignment, how are you evaluating? So maybe having that conversation, and that's what I think is important, is to start this conversation with students like, okay, you're using social media information, but how can we evaluate it? There has to be a process to evaluate it, so that way we can one of the things I ask students sometimes is, when it comes to information literacy, let's think about it. Let's take a couple of steps back and let's kind of think about it in a way about where we shop for our clothes, right? For our clothing, very simple, non-related, but we don't only go to one store to shop for clothing. We go to different stores, right? So therefore you want to have that same criteria with your information, the resources that you capture for any assignment. You want to have a diverse pool of information when it comes to understanding a particular topic. Jacob, would you like to add anything to that?
I suppose what I would add about that is that specifically about getting news from social media, because this is something that I've sort of become interested in lately. The idea about that is that I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to that sort of thing. Social media journalism is sort of the newest form of what I suppose used to be called citizen journalism. I don't know if that term is used anymore, but the advantage of that is that there's much more of a multitude of viewpoints that perhaps might not have been addressed, by a mainstream journalistic perspective. The disadvantage, of course, is that a mainstream journalism perspective has, at least, or ostensibly has, a more rigorous process behind it. And so I think I would agree with Jocelyn in the sense of that in evaluating where our news comes from, no matter the source, whether it's from, a legitimate news source, whether it's from, I don't want to make it sound like social media is illegitimate, but or if it's from wherever it may be, it's always important to establish as to, all right, ask questions like, is this viewpoint one that is shared by other sources that are reporting on whatever this topic is? If not, why? Is there evidence which reinforces or perhaps sheds doubt on whatever this particular story or topic or idea is? It's about being self-reflective about information and about asking these questions, about asking the questions that Jocelyn outlined. And also, being cognizant of this sort of environment that we're in that's also, prone to misinformation or disinformation, because that's another whole element of this that can sort of cast doubt on that sort of thing. And it's not that these things are new, it's just that they're easier and faster. I mean, that's sort of the thing that I've always thought about AI, is that it doesn't really do anything that we couldn't do before. It just does it faster. And I think that's the main thing that people should be cognizant of when using it.
Yeah, I'd just like to take advantage of the opportunity to do a plug for our subscriptions to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. To deal with the reality is too much for me problem. I do understand that the news that we get via social media, it's very emotional, it's very sensational by its nature. And sometimes just looking maybe once a week even at the headlines of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, that can possibly satisfy the need to be somewhat up to date with current affairs without actually getting completely overwhelmed. And we do have the subscription information to both of those publications on our website, on our homepage, provided free by the university, a digital subscription to New York Times and Wall Street Journal for every member of the CUNY community.
Thank you, Ellen. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Hey, Jocelyn,
Yes.
can we email you to get a copy of that slide that has your references on it?
Oh,
That would be
yes,
helpful for purposes of the semester.
absolutely. I will put my email in the chat.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks to you and Jacob for this.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, so yeah, if you would like a copy of this, I mean, it's going to be, I'm sorry, someone has a question?
Yes, hi, it's my Lewis.
Hi.
I was trying to figure out
Hi.
I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand, and my Zoom has changed, and so I couldn't. At any rate, with regard to the social media, we do an assignment in our course, the CHS 150, foundations and human services counseling class where the students are required to find social media resources for the different modules in the course. And one of the things that we add to it is that the social media resources need to be interactive sources. So it has to be a site that is offering some type of help, or you can, have some outlet for advocacy or social action, so that it has some element of engagement. And I find that, and it has to be something that you yourself would be somewhat interested in. So those two elements of, the personal interest, as well as then it requires some level of engagement where you're gathering information or can collect and correspond, just as a means of trying to sort of increase the engagement with it. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's really important because as they're engaging, they're also evaluating the information. So that's really good because those are skills that they're building. So yes, thank you. Okay, and let's see here. Yes, definitely. We'll share a copy. Great. Any more questions or comments? Oh, no, son. Yeah, audio problems. It is being recorded and I know it's going to be shared. So that's something, yeah. I mean, it is going to go out a little later in, I believe, mid-September. So you'll get a chance to listen to it there, but you can also reach out to us in the library if you just want to kind of sit down and have a chat, of course. Okay, well, you're welcome. Well, thank you everyone so much for attending our session. I believe you have a little bit of time left. Again, we are going to, yes, if you're interested in receiving a copy of the presentation and or the reference page, you feel free to send me an email. My email is listed in the chat. And that way I can send that off to you before the semester starts, and you can share this with your students as well. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jacob. Would you like to add anything?
Just to thank everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. And again, the library has a lot of great resources for this and many other things. So we invite you to take advantage of that.
Yes, please do. Thank you all.